excited. I know it's a bit weird that I'm hosting and Henrik's in the room still, but episode 6 of Wednesday Rewind, bit of a tongue twister. I've always found Wednesday Rewind. I've always been confused with that. But we've got Henrik Beasy, Warren Elliott, and Kirsten Elliott here with us today. So we're going to jump straight into Ephesians 5 on episode 6. It confused me. Don't let it confuse you. So Henrik,
Yes,
you spoke Sunday night and I thought it was great.
Thank you.
Even though I wasn't there, I'm thankful that we recorded. If you haven't seen it, I advise you to stop watching this, go watch that, come back, and then all this will make sense. But Henrik, I want to get some thoughts from you because you did say you could speak for 6 hours on it. We won't do that today. But there's a one part that you said, and it was near the start, and I did take notes. It was, why do we imitate God? Because we are his children and because we've been adopted into his family. And so the thing I love about this that you've talked about is you've summarized basically all of Ephesians up to it, and you just kept going back and giving context. And so that little phrase of why do we imitate God? Because we are his children, because we've been adopted into his family. What kind of triggered that to make you go, yeah, that's where I'm going with this?
Well, so a little bit of context again, just for what I'm about to say.
Context.
So you guys would know that Jess and I got married just about a year ago. We're just, I think it's only 5 or 6 days short of our anniversary now. And so leading up to us getting married, we were doing marriage classes with Lynn, and I was doing a lot of my own study on marriage. And this little subchapter of Ephesians on marriage came up a few times, and I watched a few sermons on it. And I get the sense, I get the feeling that this subchapter is taken out of context a lot, very frequently. And people use it, you know, like there are non-Christians that use it to make Christianity look archaic or sexist or whatever. There have been people who call themselves Christians, men in particular, that have used it to kind of, you know, make their wives be somewhat underneath them or belittle them or something, and in the worst of cases, you know, maybe to make things like abusive relationships okay or something. And that's not the picture that Paul is outlining in Ephesians 1, 2, 3 of the gospel of Jesus and the character of God and what he's wanting for humanity. He's outlining this picture of humanity being reconciled to God, being adopted into the family, of unity between the body and between people and God, of this sacrificial love of Jesus that would do anything to make the church, to make the body of Christ holy and righteous before God. It's that picture of love. And it's straight after that, all that sort of stuff that he talks about imitating God. And he talks then about the a few particular relationships like marriage, like parents and children, whatever. He starts talking about relationships straight away. And so I don't think that you can take those little lines like, you know, submit and all that kind of stuff out of the context of the bigger picture of a God that wants to welcome people into a family, wants to take down barriers and walls, and wants to have unity within his body for a common purpose of bringing his kingdom about now and of bringing glory to him. So, I wanted to try and highlight that marriage was, the picture of marriage that Paul is outlining has to fit in with that overall picture that he's giving beforehand as well. Does that make sense? Did that kind of...
Yeah.
I think the other thing that you've always got to contextualize in this is that marriage was different back then than it is today. And this whole debate around statues and, recasting people in the light of today on, their historical selves in the light of how we look at things today, it can be a little bit harsh and can put out of context a little bit how we look at those people. And with this thing about marriage as well. So I'm not sure that I have a full grasp of what marriage looked like back then, but I'm sure it was different than what it is. I know from things that I've read that wives were often looked on more almost as possessions rather than an equal relationship. And so if you look at that, if you try to look at that passage with that idea that marriage was very different, try to work, we need to look at how that is actually being a progressive thought about marriage probably at that time, rather than what we look back on now and as regressive, saying that the wife is subject to the husband and all that sort of stuff. It was actually probably more a progressive thing because they were more arranged sort of marriages. There was not necessarily the love as we understand it today in those at the start. People didn't get married because they loved each other necessarily, but because of an arrangement that was made. And then they grew to love each other, often in marriage. So yeah, we have to keep that in mind as well. So there's two things at work here. There's that scriptural context, but also the historical context, and who it was written for, and who it was written by, and the times, and all that sort of stuff. So that sort of stuff makes it a little bit more complicated sometimes, and people take that easy route, as you've suggested, Henrik, of saying, "Oh, that's just a sexist or misogynistic look at the way that Christianity views things," but it's not given all that context.
I'm not sure that it's necessarily the easy route, but I think that the word submit has a lot more connotation these days in our context, which is what raises people's hackles, so that they just leave that. They say if that's what the Bible says about a marriage, submitting, we're not having any part of that. But as you say, Henrik, and I thought your sermon was terrific too. I've got to pop that in too. You can't do those things. You can't see that in isolation. You really have to have it in the whole context. And even going back to that verse before that says submit to one another out of reference for Christ is key in actually saying, well, it's bigger than just, the marriage relationship, but the marriage relationship is something very special. So we need to make sure that we are loving and cherishing our partner even more than those around us. But it's expected from all of us that we, as we submit to Christ, we submit to each other.
I like how you picked out, Henrik, sorry, and I'll
it's all good.
You then for a sec. That one from the Passion Translation that said that marriage is a vivid example of Christ's relationship. And I think that's true, not just of our relationship with Christ, but of all those relationships. If we can't make our marriage, which is like the central relationship for those of us that are in that, if that doesn't show an example of what true love is about and how Christ intended us to love everybody, that we should hold each other in respect and that sort of stuff. If we can't do it there, then how can we get those other relationships right? So I think that was that idea that's a vivid example, and as you say, Kirsten, that it's just a starting point for relationships, that we need to have respectful, honouring relationships with people inside and outside of marriage.
Yeah. It was also about how we live out our relationship with God in our normal life. So, in the marriage, in the family, in all of those key relationships.
I think that's why I spoke about marriage between, humans, but I also wanted to really highlight that line that Paul talks about, how marriage is a vivid example of the relationship between God and humanity and his church. The New Living puts it as an illustration of the way Christ and the church are one, are united. And he uses that line straight after quoting Genesis 2, man and woman leave their mother and father and they become one. And it's this picture of unity again. And that's why I wanted to talk about the context of unity previously in the letter as well. That, for example, Jesus worked in unity with the Father. Even at times it meant that he had to submit his kind of, I don't know the right way to say this, not his will, but he submitted to the will of the Father for the good of humanity. There was that time where he's praying that, if you can take this cup from me, please do, but no, your will be done. because he knew it was the best thing. And so I guess I wanted to highlight the picture of the church being married to God. And at times, this world wants us to have our own sovereignty over our own lives all the time. And we don't like this idea of submission. But in the church, in the Christian walk, if we view ourselves as being submitted to Jesus, submitted to, Jesus as the husband, then that is for our own goodwill. And I know that's not an easy kind of picture to grasp in our modern context. But at the same time, if we can hand over our all, as Jonathan was talking about, this I surrender all, what does the gospel, what does the good news that Paul has laid out require of us? It requires us to give Jesus everything, not because we want to be, lose ourselves and lose our own identity or whatever, but because we know that he is a loving, caring God that wants to bring all things together and to break down walls and to do all that kind of stuff. I don't know if that made too much sense just then, but that idea of submission is a different one to maybe what the world likes to hear. But, if you're submitting to something, I don't know, the picture that Paul writes of the husband, and I don't want this to be too much in the context of man and wife relationship on earth, but thinking about God as the husband and us as the bride of Christ, this idea of submitting to him is actually a really good thing for us, because we were created for that purpose of being united to him as one, that works in unity. So does that kind of make sense? Yeah,
it's good. I like, it makes sense. It's good. I love that you keep giving context. It's the best thing to do, speaking about the Bible and anything that's happened. But on what basically everyone's said so far, you said this on Sunday night, that I thought was really cool and really impactful, is the image of marriage that Paul is laying out for us isn't just good for married people. It's good for all believers, because it is designed to reflect the image of Jesus's covenant to all of us. I think that's really cool and really amazing that, and I've never thought of that. Like when you think marriage, you think, oh yeah, marriage is love and all that fun stuff. And then to have that in context of saying, hey, well, actually, this is what it means. We're reflecting God's covenant to the world. And it's kind of a big responsibility on how we live our lives. And so you really do challenge us when you preach, and it's really good. And I love that. But if anyone else wants to jump in with their thoughts of, it's designed to reflect the image of Jesus' covenant to all of us.
I just want to say one little quick thing there. I think, we have these really high, lofty, serious promises that we make publicly before a congregation, before God, with as Christians, with a pastor, a minister, when we get married, and we promise this lifelong commitment to our spouse. We promise to love them, whether it's in sickness, in health, in good times, in bad times, all that kind of stuff. And that is the covenant that Jesus has made with us, that for him, and he shows it in complete faithfulness, regardless of when we fail him, regardless when we live unfaithfully to him, he is faithful to us all the time. And so it really challenged me, again, not thinking too much necessarily about my marriage to Jess or just in human marriage, but I wanted to challenge myself. Hold on, the way I live my life as a follower of Jesus, but more so as someone in a covenant relationship with Jesus, do I live as a faithful, this sounds so weird, but do I live as a faithful spouse of Jesus? In the way I live my life, in the things that I do, in the way that I act, in the, I don't know, am I being true to the faithful covenant that Jesus has made to me, and that I've signed up to in him? So, yeah. That was my thought then.
I think that's one of the things that we don't take so seriously these days in marriage, or I don't see that in society these days, is that contract covenant relationship. It's really a formalization, it seems, of a loving relationship. That's what people are thinking about marriage these days. And there's not so much that idea of the contract and the covenant. And I think that goes beyond marriage these days as well, that we don't take seriously those commitments that we make to others or to organizations or whatever. and it's all about, well, this is for a time, and we can change this. So maybe we need to start thinking about the wording that we use for some of those contracts and covenants and all that sort of stuff to really reflect what it is that they're saying, because I don't think we have, there's a sense that we don't go into those things with as much commitment in terms of seeing, we use the word covenant, but I think we need to make that stronger in terms of the marriage contract. It's something that we go into and should take very seriously. And you're right, Henrik, those promises that we make to each other in the wedding ceremony should be more than just making it a lovely ceremony for people to enjoy or whatever, but they are really, deep promises that we make to each other about how we will treat each other, how we will care for each other, and how we will honor each other. And to me, that's the stuff that really came through in that. It's that honor and respect each other in marriage, and that's the one that spills over into any relationship, that you should treat everybody that you're in a relationship with respect and honor them. But marriage should be even more so, because of those promises that we've made to each other in that publicly in front of everyone, to that we would uphold those things.
Yeah, and that, to me, I watched a sermon recently that talked about that covenant love. That the covenant love is more than just a physical attraction love, or a feelings love, or a whatever. A covenant love provides people like we have in Jesus, like the church has in Jesus. We have this security, this this unbreakable covenant with him, that we know that he is faithful to us regardless of what we do. And I think, that's what Paul is saying here, that the illustration is supposed to be that man and woman on earth, but also the church to Christ, we're supposed to enter into an unbreakable covenant that provides that, endless security, and a contract between Jesus and the church, between man and woman, between people in the church and, their leaders and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, love it. You
and
posed
their pets.
and owners and their pets, between a covenant contract between Henrik and his adopted dog.
Charlie is loving getting to know the local surroundings here. The other dogs in the neighborhood, and
He's evangelizing.
yeah.
Your dog is an evangelist. But you posed, you can cut that from the tape, but you don't have to, because it's great. You posed 3 questions Sunday night to married couples, to in a relationship couple. What was that? Dating couples. That's the word I'm looking.
Yeah.
So married, dating, and then everyone. And so for the married couples, it was, does my marriage honor and reflect the love of Jesus? And that's a question that because it posted yesterday as a recording this, and I was like, and it really, because you never think too in depth about it for me. Yeah. We'll come back to it. I'll ask the other 2, and then we can come back to it, Henrik. I know you're eager to answer that. The second one was for the dating couples, is, are you approaching this time in a way that honors your partner with the same love? And then the last question was for everyone, is, am I devoted to Jesus, and does my life reflect that? And so I think those 3 questions, as much as they're categorized to some degree, they can relate to all of us in some way. And I think those 3 questions are challenging. And they're not just I'm challenging you this week to think about these questions. It's actually, this is our life. Does our love for our spouse, our partner, our other people, does this reflect the love of God? And I think that's the real crux of those questions. So if someone wants to jump in and talk about that, that's perfectly fine. If not, do what you want.
I think, I'll shut up in a sec, but I think I added a tag onto either that question or maybe somewhere else in the sermon, talking about human marriage. I think I posed a question somewhere about, does my marriage point the world the love of Jesus, or to that covenant love of Jesus as well. And that was a question that I'm wanting to take more seriously in my marriage to Jess. Does our relationship does the covenant of love that we've made together, and does the way that we show that love to each other, to the world, does that point people to this pure covenant love of Jesus and the goodness in that? That's a real question for me, and so I kind of challenge myself, and we kind of have talked about this sort of stuff a little bit in our marriage as well, about wanting to point people towards Jesus in the way that we live as a married couple. Sorry, someone else can.
I was just going to say that I think the first part of the chapter really helps in that as well, because it talks about the way that we behave. Like it talks about don't being immoral or impure. We need to watch the way that we speak. And you could easily take that stuff in isolation and say, well, that's a chat to everyone. And now I want to go on and talk about our marriage relationships, or, you know, in the next chapter, it will be parents and children and slaves and masters, all that sort of stuff. But I really like how he's done that as a foundational block before sort of saying, you know, these are some of the specific things about these relationships, because this is the stuff that's important for all relationships. It's about the way that we talk to each other. It's about the way that we live our lives. It's about being almost, you could say, nice people, you know, and that actually, if we live our lives outside of those sort of guidelines, then we're not showing ourselves to be any different. So it's not just about the way that we respond and whether I, you know, talk dirty or swear or live an immoral life or all those sort of things. But it's actually more about our relationships, how we relate to each other, how we speak, and how we encourage each other in those things as well.
And all those things, Warren, all those things that he's talking about there that we shouldn't do, and there's another few earlier in chapter 4, all of those things work against everything that Paul has tried to set up as the picture of God in the first 3 chapters. They break down the unity between people, they break down the family and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's another reason why he's put them in there. We need to imitate God because we're working for this unity and this you know, inclusive family and all of that kind of stuff. And that stuff's only going to break it down. Yeah,
exactly. So I thought that was a really important point to make in that as well, to really link those things through. And I really liked how you had the idea of being imitators of God. That's not just rules for a good marriage or rules for living your life, but it's really, it was emphasizing that point of imitation of God looks like this. And Paul does that in a number of places in his various letters. He talks about when, you know, be holy. That's more sort of Peter says that, but it's like, be holy. And this is how you do it, by making sure that you're living your life in this way. Not rules to be applied to make yourself holy, but to show that you are different, that you are set apart, which is one of the definitions of holiness. Show that you are set apart by living your lives in this way. And not succumbing to those other ways of the world.
Yeah, love it. I love the title, Imitators of God, or maybe I just changed that to Imitators of God.
Made to imitate.
Well, do you know what? It's the same principle. I think made to imitate, imitators of God. It's the crux of it. I really love that. And it's a challenge that we are made to imitate. And it comes down to who, what, we are imitating. I think I'll just read the 3 questions again as we wrap up our Wednesday Rewind tongue twister. Those 3 questions: does my marriage honor and reflect the love of Jesus? Are you approaching this time in a way that honors your partner? That's for dating. And then for everyone is, am I devoted to Jesus? And does my life reflect that? I think those 3 questions are really challenging as Christians, of how we live, how we have relationships with each other and our partners and spouses. So those are the 3 questions that Henrik posed. Have a think about them. Send in to Henrik, because he'll always read it. I won't. Your answers, if you want to chat to someone, Henrik, Warren and Kirsten are always available to talk. I will send on messages to them and they'll get back to you. Remember that context matters, as we've been told plenty of times from Henrik. And also, I never thought I would hear Warren say talk dirty. So just let's put that on a loop right now at the end as we close Wednesday Rewind.
Just remember that thing about context.
Context. No, this is one thing, Warren, we can take out of context just for fun. But thank you, Henrik, for the amazing message. I'm going to re-watch it again and again and again and make my wife watch it with me. So I just got a lot out of it. Thank you, Warren. Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you, everyone, for watching. We love you. You are loved. Be blessed.